On the 10th of June 1944, a group of soldiers from the De Führer Regiment of the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich entered and then surrounded the small town of Oradour near to the city of Limoges. On the 6th of June 1944, the Allied armies crossed the sea and invaded the Normandy beaches. This was the start of the liberation of Europe. Many lives were to be lost, not forgetting the people of Oradour Massacr. This is the peaceful little village of Oradour Massacr in happier times, when people would walk down to the river to have picnics with their children. But little did they know that towards the end of the Second World War, in this peaceful part of France, and in the village of Oradour Massacr, there took place a particularly horrible murder of 642 men, women and children. When the D-Day invasion began on the 6th of June 1944, the Das Reich Regiment was ordered to move north to Normandy to help the rest of the German army repel the Allies and throw them back into the sea. As soon as the SS began to move north, they were attacked by the resistance at every step along the way. They were ambushed and shot at. We must never forget what they did to the villagers. This is the new town of Oradour Massacr, just south of Limoges. It was built after the Second World War, but the circumstances of the building of this new town are very sinister. At the end of the village you will find a memorial. Opposite the memorial, at the bottom of the new town, is the old martyred village of Oradour Massacr. Oradour was a prosperous village. In architectural harmony, the houses stood alongside shops. The village church, which was very old, was a remarkable building and was very famous. Before the war, several hotels and restaurants welcomed customers who had come to rest and to take advantage of the attractive surroundings. The inhabitants of Limoges enjoyed spending a few hours there. The time to have a picnic or fish for a while in the River Glane, a little river in which fish was particularly plentiful. In the census of 1936, the population stood at 1,574 inhabitants, 330 of whom lived close together in the main part of the village. On the day of the drama, there was a larger number of people present in Oradour because the men of the surrounding countryside had come there for the distribution of tobacco, and the children of the neighbouring hamlets were at school in the village. Since 1940, people who had been expelled from the Moselle district had been living in the village, and they suffered the same tragic fate as the residents of Oradour Massacr. At 2 p.m. saw the arrival of the SS. After surrounding the village, soldiers ordered the inhabitants to go to the fairground, known as the village green. At 3 p.m, they started to round up the men, women and children. Machine guns were installed at a place of assembly, to which women and men from the neighbouring villages were also directed. The school children arrived in lines, accompanied by their teachers. At 3:30 p.m. came the separation. Soldiers separated the men from the women and children. The latter were directed towards the church. A few moments later, the men were divided into groups and dispatched to different places for execution. At 4 p.m, the executions began. An explosion was heard. At this signal, the machine guns spat death. The killers finished off some with a bullet, before setting fire to the piles of broken bodies. At 5 p.m. came the massacre of the women and children. The SS set down a box from which cords protruded. When these were set fire to, causing suffocating smoke, real panic gripped the women, who all rushed towards the doors. The SS were waiting for them. Machine gun fire forced them back inside. From this carnage, only one woman escaped with her life. It was Madame Refranche. This was a brutal killing of innocent beings who perished in the fire, in atrocious suffering. The youngest of the children was only 8 days old. As the children marched off to the church, they were encouraged to sing along the way by the German soldiers. After the Germans had massacred the women and children, they set fire to their bodies. The heat was so intense that even the church bells melted. You can still see the bullet holes etched into the altar stone. Madame Refranche saw her younger daughter, who was sitting next to her, killed by a machine gun bullet as they attempted to find shelter in the vestry. Madame Refranche then ran to the altar end of the church, where she found a stepladder used to light the candles. Placing the ladder behind the altar, she climbed up and threw herself through the window and out onto the ground some 10 feet below. As she picked herself up, a woman holding a baby tried to follow, but they were seen by the soldiers, and both the woman and her child were machine gunned and killed. In spite of being shot and wounded 5 times, Madame Refranche managed to escape to nearby gardens until she was found the following day. Towards the end of 1943, the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich was moved from Russia to southern France, so that they could be re-equipped and retrained. One of Das Reich's young officers was Adolf Deichmann, who had been severely wounded fighting the French in 1940. He had been shot through the lung and had spent several years as an instructor on light duties at the SS Officer Training School at Bad Tolz. Before going to Russia in the autumn of 1943, another officer was Deichmann's friend Helmut Kampf, who had already spent several years in Russia and had recently won the Knight's Cross for his bravery in halting a Russian tank attack. The resistance was active around the area of Oradour Massacr, but they could not do much serious damage to Das Reich. But they could and did irritate the troops a great deal, in the same way that midges can spoil a picnic. These attacks continued, and then on the 8th of June, the FTP resistance tried to liberate the town of Toul from the occupying German garrison. In the battle that followed, the FTP came close to capturing all the German troops. But before they could quite finish the job, that evening Das Reich arrived to the rescue. The SS made short work of the undisciplined and poorly armed resistance fighters, who were soon in full retreat. When the Germans had secured the town, they found that the resistance had killed and mutilated some surrendered garrison troops, so reprisals were called for. The SS rounded up all the men that they could find, and after questioning them briefly, selected 120 of them to be hung from lampposts as a warning to the resistance and anyone thinking of helping them. There was no proof that these 120 men were actually members of the resistance, but that did not matter to the SS. After 99 had been hung, the soldiers ran out of rope, and so the remainder were not killed on the spot, but deported to Germany as slave labourers. The drama of Oradour Massacr lasted only a few hours. Those few hours were sufficient to wipe out 642 human lives. 328 constructions were destroyed. General de Gaulle wanted to preserve the ruins of Oradour in order to bear witness for the rest of mankind to the consequences of the brutality and barbarity of war. The ruins are those of a little village which was just like hundreds of others in France and around the world. These stones, laid bare by the passage of time, were those of a living community.